Hey, Critical Analysis. So this is kind of part 2, if you will, of week 5. If I scroll down here, we are in chapter 3, so you can see your main video is right there, which goes over the chapter 3 content of topics and main ideas. It also walks you through the homework for chapter 3 as well as the text and skill practice for chapter 3. So we are going to be just talking about the vocabulary. So I will be looking at both the materials folder. So in the materials, the chapter 3 study guide, if you want to have that out and ready. So I have that pulled up and ready to discuss. And then we will go over those words, and then with those words, you'll see that you have your chapter 3 vocabulary quiz, which we will also discuss. That'll go right along with the words for this particular chapter. So that is the purpose of this video, is to go over the vocabulary words. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull up my completed study guide and just talk about these words. Okay, so from genes down to contention. Right here, this set of words, this comes from the story Fat Chance, which we talked about in your text and skill practice sheet. So if I click here, reading number 1, and I go to the actual reading, so you'll see the reading is right here. The words that are in this first chunk are found in this selection. So as you read it to answer the questions on your text sheet, you probably saw some of these words embedded in that story. So let's go over these words. So you'll see the word genes, which just means something that's passed down from parents. So they're talking about, in this case, issues of like weight and obesity and in the context of people's eating habits. But so genes means like something that is passed down from children to the children from parents. Exhortation is something like, hey, I really need to tell you this. It's really important. I need to it's kind of like a matter of urgency. You're trying to really get your point across. You want someone to do something or understand something. So you're trying to really get that important message across. Metabolism, again, we're talking in the context of, eating and weight loss, and the story is how quickly you can burn calories or fat, how quickly your body metabolizes what it takes in. Also, as part of this, we have the word cunningly. So if something is cunning, it's sometimes talked about in a negative way. Maybe you're doing something kind of shady, shrewd, sneaky. Now, sometimes cunning can be positive. It just depends on how you approach it. But cunningly just is done in a crafty, shrewd, sneaky type way. Then we have intervention, which is probably maybe familiar. We've heard of interventions before. Could be for different things. In school, you might have been intervention for like reading, or you might have heard of intervention for maybe drug abuse or alcohol issues. But intervention just means to step in order to help remedy something. You're trying to fix something, improve something. Okay, now we have strides, so they're not talking necessarily about like the stride when we walk, but strides as in making progress on something, to make an advancement towards something. This year was a great example. They made a lot of strides on the vaccine for COVID. And then we have contention as part of this, the last one in that reading, to a certain opposite view. So if you're in contention with something, you contend what they say, you have an opposite viewpoint of them, a different side of the argument. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we think that that's negative, but it's okay to, have that opposite viewpoint. You're in contention with someone. You don't necessarily agree or believe the same thing. So those are the words that come from that selection called Fat Chance. Now we are going to talk about a few words that come from the biographical profile of our chapter. So pages 102, 103. So I'm going to click in here. All right, sometimes I can get to it from here. I told you it's not always my favorite way to navigate online. I'm just going to go ahead and search for it. I'm just going to click in page 102, and here goes, biographical profile. So we're going to go right there. All right, and we're going to click. It's on Pierre, and you're probably familiar with this because it kind of makes this callback to like Atkins-like diets. Again, remember this is it's in the nutrition chapter. So they're talking about this Dr. Duncan who came up with this different diet program, and so they not reminisce, but bring up in the context of this, the Atkins and so on. So if this is a field of interest for you, certainly read through this for that purpose, but there are also 3 vocabulary terms that come from here. So we have in this reading, let me pull this back up again, we have the word revolution. They're talking about this like diet revolution. Revolution meaning something that's very dramatic, a dramatic change, something very different. Serendipitous is something that means it happened by chance. It wasn't planned. It happened maybe spur of the moment or just kind of a happenstance type situation. And then the word excess means extra or more than enough. If you have excess of something, it's more than enough. Obviously having an excess of money would be a great thing, but having an excess of stress is not so great. So excess can be both a positive and a negative thing. So those 3 words come from the biographical profile in our chapter on Pierre Duckin. And again, I encourage you to read it not only for the vocabulary and how they're used in the context of the selection, but for those of you, particularly if you're in the health field or diet, nutrition, that kind of area, it's an interesting read. Okay, so from there, that finishes that whole front side. And we're going to scroll down and we're going to start the back side, which is going to also bring us to a different reading. So if I go back here and I get back to my table of contents, we are going to be looking at, and this was another one that you would have read for your text sheet, reading 3A, and it went along with another reading right afterward. This was the Bottlers Agree to a School Ban on Sweet Drinks, and remember we read this, and then there was like a kind of a rebuttal letter that followed along with it, that accompanied it, that you had when you had questions. There was a mix. So the my soda, my choice, like a little kind of follow-up to it. So that was in there as well. Okay, so that's where this is coming from. So here we go. There's only this set right here come from those 2 readings. Advocacy means to support something. If you're an advocate, you believe in it, you support it. Maybe you write letters, you go to demonstrations, you talk about it. You're trying to support whatever cause or activity it is. Accord means to be in agreement. So if we go back up here, we know that this is kind of the opposite of contention. If you're in accord with something or someone, it means you're on the same page. You're in agreement with them. Preposterous, you've probably heard this word before, it just means unreasonable, like preposterous, that sounds ridiculous. So it sounds like it's an unreasonable or it's not very possible sounding. And then endowed means to be given. So if you've ever heard of like an endowment, oftentimes someone might leave someone money in their will, they endow them something to be given. So those are the words from those kind of combined readings, the Bottlers and the My Soda, My Choice follow-up. All right, and then the very last set of words come from our TED Talk. So if we scroll down and we kind of click on our TED Talk, this is where the last set of words come from. Right here, edible, down to audacity. Now, whether you read the TED Talk or you listened to the TED Talk, hopefully you read or heard these words used in context. So the word edible means to be able to be eaten. Pretty straightforward there. If something's edible, you can eat it. If it's not edible, you shouldn't eat it. So edible, you can eat it, food, whatever it might be. Destitute means very poverty-stricken. If something or someone is destitute, it means there's just very, very poor. So there are parts of our country that might be considered destitute, but there are definitely other countries in our world that this would really kind of strike a chord. I always share with my classes, like when my husband went on his missions trip to Haiti, he definitely saw some very destitute parts of the world on that trip. Very poverty-stricken, very poor. Then we have the word marginalized, which means to be discriminated. A group of people, if they're marginalized, they're treated poorly. They're kind of like set aside, and they're not accounted for in a lot of ways. There's some discrimination going on. Tenacious is full of perseverance. Like if you are tenacious, you are determined. You are going to work hard. You're going to persevere. Palate, they're talking about dealing with taste buds. Like sometimes you might have a sophisticated palate and you like lots of different things. Other times your palate might be very simple. You might be a little bit picky, and so only certain things you will eat. And then finally, audacity means you're willing to take risks. You're bold, daring. You're willing to kind of put yourself out there and do different things. And again, all those come from our TED Talk, whether you read it or listened to it. Right? And that is the set of vocabulary words for the second part of our study guide. So that is your Chapter 3 text sheet vocabulary words. And again, you do not need to turn the vocabulary study guide in. You do not need to turn this one in. That's why you will never see a Dropbox for it. It is simply an aid to help you understand the meaning of the vocabulary words in this chapter. So if we go back to our course, we do see that you have a vocabulary quiz. This quiz is due on Sunday with your text and skill practice and your practice sheet. Remember, you're doing your discussion board by Wednesday for week 5 attendance, but these other areas are all due Sunday. So you'll go in, you'll click on that to bring the quiz up. And again, I already have mine up right here. When you are done, some of you are typing in, some of you are writing in and scanning it back in, whatever works for you. When you're done, remember you'll click in here. There's your due date reminder. You'll find where you saved it, click on it, open it, and submit it. So let's walk through the quiz real quickly just to make sure you're okay, because I am seeing just a couple things I want to point out. Part A, only one sentence is correct. Only one. I know I've said it in a couple other videos, but I still have some people writing correct more than one time. So please make sure that you only correct one sentence. So one of these is correct. The rest you have to fix somehow. And adding the word not is usually not enough. So you need to make sure that you are adjusting the sentence a little bit more than that. So keep the underlined word the same in every sentence that you need to correct, which should be 4 of them total. Keep that underlined word the same. And if you need to change, according, that kind of thing, that's okay. Serendipitously, that's fine, but keep the base, keep that word there. You do not have to substitute it for another vocabulary word. And then just adjust the sentence somehow. Take out some words, add in some words, rearrange, whatever you need to do. Part B is short answer. Please make sure you just answer the question. So number 1 is always kind of set up for you, but you still need to answer it. A couple of people have been failing to answer that first question because they think it is done for them. It kind of sets it up as a model of how to start off your questions, but you still need to answer it. And this is something to pay attention to. This says describe why. Give an example. Why? Make sure you answer those parts when there's more than one. Look at this one. In this chapter, what does that mean? What does it mean to be? So again, make sure you answer and respond to those full questions. And then part C is just fill in the blank. Remember, you won't use every single one of those options, and you won't use any of them twice, but just make sure. One tip I always tell my students is once you plug in the word in your sentence, read it out loud to yourself. Make sure it actually sounds right. Sometimes when you read it back to yourself, it might even sound like, oh, that doesn't sound right at all. Sometimes that helps a little bit. So again, make sure that you use your study guide to help you, but you are not turning in your study guide. I do not need your study guide to be turned in. You will simply turn your quiz in that Dropbox right there by Sunday. All right, I hope everyone has a great week 5. Talk to you soon. Bye.